and welcome back to the channel. This episode's going to be a little bit different because we're going to focus on movie review this time of Gladiator 2. So I have Rome in the background because it kind of matters, kind of relevant. I'm also going to show some video clips and maybe some images to kind of clear my opinion or make sure people understand what I'm talking about. Anyways, let's get right into it. If you don't want to watch the entire video and kind of just want a rundown of what my opinion is, you think my opinion's gospel, as a clear Rome fan, I'm going to keep it honest with you. You can just skip to probably the last minute of the video. That'll have my summation points up. Anyways, let's talk about some of the first couple things on the docket, and that's other people's criticism. Now, I'm not going to tell you what movies to like. I'm not going to tell you how to like movies. But there are forms of criticism out there that make sense and then some that don't. And this first little section is going to basically be about those criticisms that don't necessarily make sense. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's first talk about historical accuracy. Now, Gladiator, the first one, was never super historically accurate. Let me explain. So within the first Gladiator movie, Commodus is like the main bad guy, right? And then they have his father, Marcus Aurelius, and then his sister also has her kid that he's trying to, be creepy with, which is kind of why Joaquin Phoenix's performance is so good, because he kind of sells that. But I'm going to be honest with you. People really criticized. I saw a couple criticisms out there of Gladiator 2 on like, oh, boats shouldn't have trebuchets on them, or how did they put water in the Colosseum, for instance. Well, it's not really valid criticism, because in the first movie, your main bad guy is Commodus. There's only, besides Commodus here, there's only two other main people in the movie that are actual real people. Like, so here's your sister, Marcus Aurelius, of course. And then you might ask, well, Fizzy, why is that important? Well, it's because if you're going to complain about Gladiator 2 not necessarily being the most historically accurate movie, then why does the first one get a pass? Like, Commodus, if you know your Roman history, Commodus never even died in the gladiator ring. There was nobody named Maximus in real life that was a general. He's a fake character. He's not real. Commodus was killed by the gladiator known as Narcissus, I think, basically. Kind of similar to that. But Commodus, he's portrayed differently than he was in real life. And that's something, a lot of people who watch these kind of movies kind of overlook. You can complain that, oh, Trebuchet shouldn't have been on the boat, or, oh, Denzel Washington's character doesn't make sense. He wasn't real. But it's like, no, neither was Maximus, neither was the Praetorian Guard guy, neither was basically anybody in that movie except for the royal family. Which, if you know anything about stories, I mean, that's completely fine. I personally don't see a problem with it. And that's because Gladiator is not a documentary. It's not a movie about the exact things that happened. It's a dramatization. It's not even based on a real story. It kind of is, but Commodus did not kill Marcus Aurelian in real life either. So, why people say, oh, Gladiator 2 is historically accurate, therefore it kind of ticked me off. I'm going to be honest with you, it's not necessarily valid criticism to me, because it's not a historical film. even in recent years, the Napoleon movie was a bit more of a better example of a movie where you can be upset about the historical inaccuracies because it's more or so less based on a real person. The Marcus Aurelius, the Commodus in the movies of Gladiator, he's not those are not the same guys as what they were in real life. Does that make sense? So you can maybe get a little bit onto it for historical inaccuracy because it does use real people's names, but those movies were never intended to be super historically accurate. So I think if you criticize the movie based on it was a little bit historically inaccurate, I think you're missing the point of the movie entirely. But this also kind of transitions into another point that I like to make, and that is this country that we live in, or at least some of us live in, kind of has forgotten what the rule of cool is. And what I mean by the rule of cool is you don't, when you're watching something or conceptualizing something, it's not necessarily a bad thing if it doesn't make sense, if it's cool. So, say you're having a space movie and they go forward into space and go through like a portal to end up on another planet. You don't question that, oh, it doesn't make sense that they can travel faster than light. That's impossible. Nobody should have that ability. You just say, oh, that's cool. Or when they go on a planet and, or in Jurassic Park, for instance, when the T-Rex is outrunning the Jeep. Would T-Rex be able to outrun a Jeep in real life? Probably not. But I will say this. It's cool that it outran a Jeep and almost killed the main characters. So I don't really question it because it's cool. It adds tension. It adds, factors into the movie that wouldn't be there without it. The Jurassic Park movie would be worse without the presence of a T-Rex being really fast or being able to sneak up on the velociraptors. Same goes with Gladiator 1. The movie wouldn't make sense if, it doesn't necessarily make sense that Maximus would, be leading the charge in front of his cavalry in the opening fight. But it's important to the movie, and it's cool because it establishes him as, one of those guys that commands loyalty. It's got a purpose behind it. So another major criticism people got of the movie is that it involves a lot of people who are like riding rhinos, for instance. I'll show parts of the trailer now that kind of people mention about it. As we can kind of see right here, we have a lot of, in the trailers, we have a lot of interesting parts of kind of the movie. Here's some of the boats that people were complaining about, maybe not necessarily being the most historically accurate, and then one that people really complained about was the guy riding the rhinoceros. And yeah, it doesn't make sense that a guy would be able to go ride a rhinoceros in the Gladiator arena, but people have forgotten also that the rule of cool is a thing. This is cool, so therefore it's allowed, in my opinion, to be a thing. So I think those are two unnecessary criticisms. So now, what did I actually think were valid criticisms of the movie? Well, let's just get to the pretty plain and simple part right now. A lot of the movie's struggle is with details. There's a feeling throughout the entire movie that Lucius, who is revealed, spoilers. Click away now if you don't want to. Skip to the end if you want to, not have it. If you haven't seen it and don't want to get spoiled. But basically, Lucius is revealed to be Maximus's son, right? Which, anybody with a little bit of background information into how movies work, or if you read a lot of books, practice storytelling, like I do, you'll you'll find pretty easily that that wasn't too big of a twist. But you can really tell that a lot of his success in this movie is based on nepotism, which is basically his dad was really special, so Lucius is special. What I mean by that is it's pretty obvious when the gladiators kind of just befriend him really easily. It's not really covered. He hangs out a lot with the doc in this movie, and he's kind of the guy that saves Lucius in the end. But his relationship with the gladiators themselves, they choose to fight with him at the end to kind of stop Denzel. But it kind of doesn't make sense, most of that, because it's not necessarily covered. He is wearing Maximus's armor at the end, so clearly he's got the street cred to get these gladiators to like him, and that's acceptable. I just wish it was a little bit more developed. And kind of that's partly the problem with the movie is that it was a little short. It didn't have the time to really go through the stripes like the original did. And you can really kind of tell that when it gets down to like Denzel's plan, etc., and Lucius's rise through the gladiator ranks. So, speaking of Denzel, let's talk about Denzel in the movie. His dialect, people were complaining a lot about how he sounded like he was from New York. I'll admit he didn't give the best Denzel impression. He gave a very good Denzel impression out there, but Denzel's one of those actors where if he has a good performance, the movie's going to do fine. And Denzel performed adequately in this movie. So, by default, this movie was kind of okay. Just merely by the fact that Denzel did okay. And he was a very interesting character. Yet again, the details were a little bit what was his direct relationship with Marcus Aurelius was my biggest question coming out of the movie. We get a lot of references to Marcus Aurelius. He says at one point, I've actually read your father's meditations when talking to Commodus' sister. So clearly he had a prior relationship with Marcus Aurelius, but it's never really covered because, yet again, they didn't have time. The movie was short, so that was a little rough part. But, okay, he doesn't like Rome and wants to destroy Rome. So that's kind of what his plan is, and what he goes about doing it is pretty awesome. And this is why one of the more underrated parts of this movie is I'm totally losing this battle, is the emperors that are before our guy there, before our guy Denzel. Emperor Caracalla, I think, is who one of the emperors is, and then it's like his brother. Yeah, they're both totally crazy, and it works really well with the movie. The little brother, the one that's completely crazy, the emperor in this photo, he's really crazy and really likable just because of how crazy he is, and Denzel handles the situation really, really well. He basically manipulates this guy into killing his brother, and then he's considering killing his brother, but he's not actually going to do it. So Denzel goes and gets his hands dirty because, Denzel's a villain who does things, and that's pretty badass. But yeah, this guy takes over, puts this monkey in as a consul as well as Denzel. And pretty much Denzel's plan is working from then on. But prior to that, he was also manipulating the other brother into basically getting angry with the little brother here, and it worked out really well for Denzel, and I really liked that dynamic because it's clear this guy is just a useful idiot to to Denzel, and it worked out really well for him, and then it just made the movie a little bit better in my eyes for that. Yeah, so I think Joseph Quinn and Fred Heckinger, I think his name is, did a really good job as their emperors. They were a little over the top, but This is one of those movies where it's fine to be over the top because it's a dramatization. It's the ideal photo of Rome. You have to have the noble general like Pedro Pascal's character. I'll get into him. He's a really noble character, and that's kind of the beauty of Rome as a whole as a fan of history. Ideally, there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding Rome. There's the crazy emperors, the noble but you know kind of down to earth, but also a little strong and maybe even at times brutal generals. The Julius Caesars who are brave and smart, but also cunning and maybe necessarily a little brutal at times. That's kind of the beauty of the dichotomy of Rome in general. So that dramatization, the Emperor Caracalla and his brother, I think Geta, that's kind of adds to the idea of Rome entirely. They're crazy. That's kind of the point. That's the beauty of Roman history in general. They had crazy emperors all the time, and they really attributed well to this movie. So good on them. And as far as the recurring characters, so Lucius returning, kind of got into him. I like Lucius. His actor did a good job. So yet again, if your main character is going to do an okay performance, your movie's going to be fine. I think the guy who played Lucius did a well job, and I liked his character arc of growing to basically relearn how to accept that he's Roman and his legacy, and he's living up to his father. I actually like that part. That part is well covered in the movie, and it feels connected to Gladiator, which kind of is going to influence my total rating of the movie. I liked him. Lucilla, his mom, also a recurring character, and a couple of the senators are also recurring characters, but they're kind of minor. They end up dying at the end with his mother, and it's pretty funny. But honestly, them getting caught in kind of the Denzel overthrowing Denzel scheme is kind of why Denzel did such a good job. I mean, it was such a personal kind of attack at the end battle for Lucius, so that's what kind of the stakes were. It necessarily wasn't Rome, because Rome was going to fall anyways with those crazy ass emperors. Denzel's not going to do much worse. So, at the end of the day, that battle was more personal for Rome, or it was more personal than for Rome, if that makes sense. So, Lucius and Denzel and their character arcs are both really well. Pedro Pascal plays a good job. He is a general in this and plays a pretty big role of Lucius's arc in this movie. And Pedro Pascal, he's, I think people are starting to learn more that this was his first kind of big role in a full-blown blockbuster movie. Last movie I saw him in was the Nick Cage one, where he plays the fanboy of Nick Cage. So, wow, heavy hitting stuff, that one. Funny movie and all, but I'm not gonna come out here and say it's the next coming of the Godfather. It's just all right, that movie. Pretty funny though, but I don't judge drama by how people handle comedies, if that makes sense. So Pedro Pascal, this is his kind of first. He's coming off of The Last of Us, etc. So he's already proven that he's got some dramatic chops, and he really did display that in this movie. Him having kind of a prior plot to overthrow the emperors really helps out Lucius, and it's yet again that focus on Maximus's legacy and Marcus Aurelius's legacy in his plot to destroy the emperors and take over. He's focusing on the people and his men that are going to help him out. Eventually, he, of course, is rivaling with Lucius. And looks like he's going to be the main villain in the first movie. But Lucius, it really does show Lucius changing throughout the movie, especially when he meets his mother and learns his heritage, or is reminded of his heritage and his legacy. It really does show that he's developed when he decides to spare Pedro Pascal. And it's a pretty big deal, you know, because it does show character development, and we love character development, of course. But Pedro Pascal, a bit more minor of a role than you'd think in this movie, but he plays pretty much every scene perfectly. And he has a good plot, he has a good subplot, he has a good goal in the movie, and I think he definitely grows a little bit, but not too much. He mostly is helpful for Lucius in the movie to grow. But he did a good job. I can't wait to see him in other movies where maybe he's going to main, but I think this is a good breakout role for him into the movie sphere. As far as I guess the video is getting a little long, so I'm gonna kind of wrap it up now. The final battle is pretty good. The fact that the Roman general that Pedro Pascal plays, he gives Lucius Maximus's ring that's got Marcus Aurelius's name engraved on it. And people were kind of confused how some random general would be like, okay, I'm okay with this, and would just go march on Rome without really just some guy. I mean, people are just okay with it. Or people are really harping on the fact that the general is just okay with some dude showing up with a ring and saying, go march on Rome. To me, it makes perfect sense. You have to have a movie, so of course he has to, but at the same time, it's got it's his ring. It's Pedro Pascal's ring. The guy knows who that is. So clearly someone acquired it from him, and it's got Maximus's name on it. The guy who's giving it to him is claiming it's from Maximus's son, Marcus Aurelius's grandson. This guy has imperial blood in his veins, so why would the general question it if it's the guy's ring? I mean, he doesn't know that Pedro Pascal's dead. So maybe he should have questioned it a little bit, but I don't think it's movie breaking if he doesn't. Does it necessarily make the most sense? Maybe not, but I think that's more of a nitpick. I mean, you have to have a movie, you have to have a final battle, so how they do that is how they do that. So what we see in the movie is that, Lucius kind of foils Denzel's plan by, basically surviving. And that works out for him. And that means Denzel's got to run and survive, because Denzel is he's one of those villains that's cheeky. He's a liar. He's a manipulator. He manipulated pretty much everybody. Dude is going to try to run away, and that's what he does. So he tries to run away. And then he sees the giant army, and this is another part people criticized. Apparently people are really watching too much like Alternate History Hub or alternate history movies, because people are really harping on the idea that, like, oh, the Praetorian Guard or the army didn't look like that, or that part didn't make sense to those criticisms. Yet again, don't make sense to me. But it does make sense to me that Denzel would be forced to fight upon being confronted by the army. Like, the final battle takes place in this kind of like area, which is pretty cool. I rewatched Gladiator 1. This is a scene. This is like the same set piece, basically. But in this scene, you can see kind of like the guys on red at the bottom. these are, I believe, Pedro Pascal's men. They're marching on Rome, as that's what Lucius ordered in the dock. He goes and basically tells the general to go get his men and bring them here. But and then in the background here is the Praetorian Guard. So for me, this scene makes complete sense. You know, people were really harping on the fact that Denzel's plan, the final part of it, was to just face Lucius and fight him as a 60-year-old, which, yeah, if you don't put any thought into that and don't pay attention to the movie, yeah, it doesn't make sense that Denzel wanted to fight Lucius here. But if you actually pay attention to the movie and rub your two brain cells together, you're going to see there's a giant freaking army right here. So, what? He's just going to run past the army? No, he's got to fight. So, Denzel didn't want to fight. Denzel spent the entire movie trying not to get his hands dirty. Dude only got his hands dirty twice. One time it was to kill the Emperor. The other time it was to fight Lucius. And get this, he loses because he's an old man. But it makes sense. I mean, what's he going to do? Fight an army? Fight Lucius? You have better odds against Lucius. Maybe you have better odds fighting your army, which is the Praetorian Guard here, versus Pedro Pascal's army. But it also makes sense why he wouldn't want to do that, because the Praetorian Guard is definitely going to lose this battle. There's no way these battle-hardened, war-hardened legions are ever going to lose to these not so battle-hardened, very weak, soft-bellied Praetorian Guards. The Praetorian Guards are awesome, right? They have nice uniforms, etc., but they're not ever going to beat battle-hardened legions, and they never did in history, so, or at least to my knowledge, they never have faced off against legions and won. It's because they're guards. They're basically police force, but they're like the Secret Service. Yeah, the Secret Service can fight well, but they're outnumbered. They don't have the equipment to beat this army, so Denzel has no choice but to kill Lucius right then and there, and he almost does. So yeah, it kind of sucks, but that's the downfall of his plan. That's where Lucius wins. So yes, it does make sense that he would stand and fight, because that's his only option. He's a guy trapped in a corner with spears pointed at him. He's cornered. He's a cornered beast. He's gonna fight for his life because he's a normal person, a manipulator, but he's a guy that doesn't want to die, so he's going to fight. No ifs, ands, or buts. So in conclusion, kind of what do I think about the movie as a whole? Well, I'll give context on my thoughts on the first movie first, to kind of, actually a couple movies to kind of gauge how I'm grading this. The original movie, I think, as a movie goes, it's probably a 9 out of 10 for me. And then entertainment-wise, as a movie, looking at it very critically, how the plot functions, characters, if it's developed well, I think it's a 9 out of 10 movie. It has very few flaws. I think as my entertainment goes, it's a 10 out of 10. There's nothing that really beats Gladiator 1 as far as drama goes. It's very dramatic. The soundtrack is beautiful. This movie, Gladiator 2, kind of lacking on the soundtrack, not going to lie. That's one of the negatives to it, to me. But Gladiator 1, either a 9 out of 10 for as a movie, and then 10 out of 10 for entertainment. This movie, I will give, probably as a movie, a 5 out of 10. It needed details, a better soundtrack. It needed details, though, mostly. It really struggled getting details in it for me. So 9 out of 10 as a movie for Gladiator 1, 5 out of 10 for this one. My entertainment value for this movie, though, is probably a 10 out of 10. I was really entertained by it. It was pretty awesome. Rule of cool for the Gladiator battles themselves. And then as far as a sequel goes, it's probably 7 out of 10 because it does better than most sequels, and it really succeeds because it focuses a lot on the first movie. So in conclusion, as a movie, 5 out of 10. As a sequel, 7 out of 10. My entertainment value, though, was 10 out of 10. So I do recommend watching the movie. It's pretty good. I think most people over dramatize or focus too much on historical accuracy for a franchise that was never historically accurate to begin with. Rule of cool, folks. Don't forget it. Apparently, people have.